Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. We are live. Welcome to another Through the Pines financial podcast, a financial planning podcast with a down to earth vibe. Sasquatch would take the red pill for. I don't know. Did you see the new one?
No,
Haven't
what is
seen the new
that?
one? Okay. All right. All right.
That's
That's all
so
right.
good.
I went and saw the new one, but I didn't see any of the precursors. And so they were making fun of me because it was all new to me. Red pill versus blue pill in the Matrix. If you didn't get the reference there. Yes. Red pill versus blue pill. So Sasquatch would definitely take the red pill so he could figure out, what the alternative life may be here in Through the Pines. This episode, Money Management in Your 40s. I just may enjoy this one because I might be in my 40s. We will cover emergency funds. How much do you need? Debt. How much debt is too much debt when you're in your 40s? Investment strategies. Should you be aggressive? Should you be not so aggressive? Insurance. What kind of insurance do you need? How much do you need? Brandon, I'm hoping has some small numbers, so we'll go over those. Kids, do you have kids? Should you teach them about money? How do you teach them about money? Give them books, give them an allowance. What do we do there? Estate planning, combining 401k with other investments, living versus savings, which we talked about just recently on a previous episode, and then common questions that those in their 40s may be asking financial advisors. So we will dive right in right now. Again, this is Through the Pines podcast, money management in your 40s. Emergency fund, how much do we need? Rex, where are we at?
Well, thanks for having us on your podcast again, Brandon. First
Yeah,
off, we
yeah.
appreciate that very, very much.
I appreciate
We,
that you got a new camera. It looks really good. You look
well,
so much better with the.
thank you. Thank you. I don't know how do my kids do it? Is it like this?
I
Is that
think
how my
so.
kids do it? I think something. Anyway, so emergency funds. I know the general rule of thumb most people say is 3 to 6 months of your income, right? And for some people that can be a fairly wide area as far as that's concerned. I think when I hear 3 to 6 months of your income, I actually probably don't agree with that completely. I think normally I want 3 to 6 months of your spending, and we lean towards 3 months if you're in a more stable career, more stable job, stable industry. If you're in a more of a sales position, something that's a little more fluid, to where you may be, running your own company, you may be jumping between jobs periodically, things like that. Then we certainly lean towards 6 months and sometimes even higher, sometimes 9 months or 12 months, depending upon the kind of work that you're in. So I think it really depends on the volatility of your income.
Is that specific
Depends.
to those of us in our 40s, or does it matter if you're in your 30s, 20s, or whatever with that timeline and monthly savings?
So I think specifically in your 40s that's critical. I think when you're in your 20s, you can get away with probably a little bit less in your emergency fund, things like that. When you're in your 50s, then typically, you're in a more stable position normally anyway. But if you're unstable, then typically we'd go kind of to the 6 months. But you have so many moving parts when you're in your 40s. Normally when you're in your 40s, if you have children, typically you're dealing with teenagers, kids that are maybe in high school or head towards college, or junior high, things like that. And those are expensive children years. During those years, you typically, like it or not, typically have higher divorce rates in your 40s. And so that can be upsetting and create a lot of uncertainty in people's lives. And so there's just a lot of moving parts when you're in your 40s. And so we really like to kind of err a little bit on the higher side when you're in your 40s on those emergency funds, because too frequently you have life events that come up that can derail you financially. So
Okay, good to know. I thought it was every time I call Rex, he just tells me to save more money, but that was another. I didn't.
that's a different
It's a
podcast,
different
Brandon.
podcast. Okay, it's a different podcast. Okay, I forgot to introduce. So Rex Baxter, Brandon Smith, and Dan. I don't think can make it because he's having internet problems. I'm having camera issues. I keep switching back and forth on my camera. My camera keeps overheating for some reason. So, Rex with planwithbaxter.com for more information. Go to planwithbaxter.com and you can chat personally with Rex or Brandon and get more information about how you should manage your money in your 40s. So I think thanks you guys so much for spending some time with us here today on this podcast. Debt is something that I grew up with, and I'm very good at collecting. I can tell you that much. I've collected way too much in the past. So we have houses, we have cars, we have maybe student loans, maybe in our 40s still. At least I do. That's cool. And then some credit cards or something. Where are we sitting with debt? How much should we have in our 40s? When do we look at like, okay, we should be whittling this down?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that there's a magic answer to how much should you have. That's kind of a weird way to
Mm.
ask the question,
Like, should
probably.
I have? Yeah. Well, Rex is like zero, no debt. But
Right.
okay. Well,
So
for those
I
of us
think,
who
as
aren't
far as
on that
debt's
plan,
concerned,
yeah.
as far as debt's concerned, typically your 40s is lots of times when you're in your highest debt, because lots of people, if you took out student loans for college, typically you still have those student loans. Lots of times we're seeing people start to get them paid off in their late 40s, early 50s sometimes, which just means that we probably took out too much debt and didn't focus on paying it off quick enough coming out of college, unfortunately.
Or the job didn't pay as much as you thought it might in that position.
Absolutely. Or you didn't go into the field, which is a lot of times the case that you went to school for, right? Very, very few people actually are in the field that they studied. So there's lots of reasons. I shouldn't just cherry pick on one or two. But lots of times you're getting into your lifetime house in your 40s. You may have done that in your late 30s, but lots of times the house that you're in your 40s is the house that you're going to live in for the majority of your life. And so you may be 25, 30 years left on your mortgage in your 40s.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That puts you into your 70s paying that thing off.
It does. Yeah. It does. And then 40s, lots of times you're hitting a midlife crisis too. And what do people go out and buy during their midlife crisis?
Star Wars,
Star Wars collector
Falcon,
memorabilia.
Yeah, I think so. Pretty sure it's what Brandon, what did you buy? Anything?
For my midlife crisis?
Yeah. Are you having one? Is it about time?
Well, I just turned 33. I don't know if I'm there yet. Okay. But it'll be awesome when it happens. Just wait. I'll let you know.
Rex bought houses, right? Rex?
Tell them about the sailboat, Brandon. There is a sailboat out there.
Yeah, that's not a midlife crisis. I've done like old sailboat that you wouldn't believe how cheap you can get a sailboat for. I had like $90 of birthday money. I was like, I'm gonna spend this, and so I got looking and I was like, whoa, you can buy a sailboat for like $1,000 to $2,000. You can pick up a sailboat. Wow. So I went and showed my wife. She's like, do it. So anyway, we bought a sailboat, and it was one of the best decisions we've made. So
that's fantastic. Okay, well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a midlife crisis yet, but the next boat I buy just might be.
Yeah, and that'll be the name on the back. Will be midlife crisis, with waves or whatever. All right.
Kind of adding to what Rex said, I think ratios make a lot more sense, right? Because debt load is highly dependent on income. What's too much debt for one person isn't very much debt for another. And so usually we like in your 40s, although debt ratios are getting high a lot of times in 30s and 40s, we'd like to see optimally your debt to income ratio at about 25%. And what that means is if you take your gross debt payments monthly, right? So whatever you pay on your debt, divide that by your gross monthly income. We want to see that at about 0.25%. Obviously, we see those higher, we see those lower. But if you can get it at about 0.25%, we find that people are able to manage that debt load, make those debt payments, and still have enough left over to do the vacationing and live a fairly comfortable lifestyle. With that said, I see them at 35% all the time, but it starts to add. The more you go up on that, the more financial stress you're going to find.
Okay. 40s is a time when you have a lot of debt. That's what I heard.
Can be.
Okay. Way to boil that down, Brandon.
Yeah, we have to get out of it before you retire. And so what is then our investment strategy? How aggressive should we be when we're in our 40s?
Aggressive, really pretty aggressive. And again, it gets back to, something Rex said in another podcast although it might make strategic sense for you to be aggressive and to invest in mostly stocks, If your stomach can't handle it, then it's never a good idea, right? The last thing we want you to do is invest highly, very aggressively, be seeing those ups and then see it down, and you sell at the bottom and never recover. So we always want you to be comfortable with where you're at. But typically, what we see is that 2008, it took about 3.5 years for the markets to come back. 2000 took about 5 years. And as you go back through history, that 3 to 5 year mark is very repeatable, and happens and has happened quite a bit. And so if you're 40, or let's say you're 45 or even 50, what are the chances that you're going to see a recession and have it come back between age 50 or 49 and age 65? Well, pretty likely, right? Probably at least once, maybe twice. And can you ride that out? You'd be better off to ride all the way out in an aggressive account. And so as long as you can stomach it, it really makes sense typically in your 40s to stay somewhat aggressive.
Okay. So when do you back off? Your late 50s?
Really comes down to retirement planning. And that's where we start to look at ratios, and we start to look at, what is your distribution rate going to be? Here we've accumulated this nest egg of 401k, and when we're in retirement, how much do we need to pull out of that on an annual basis? And if that's a bigger dollar amount that we need to pull out, then we need to have a bigger dollar amount set aside that's not going to fluctuate quite as much. And then obviously we pair that with your personal risk tolerance. Can we afford to be more, aggressive or less aggressive? But those really all kind of get into the financial planning side of things. But typically, and this is just typically, your 40-year-old client isn't really all that serious about, getting every last piece of their retirement plan put together, right? In your 40s, you've got kids, you've got the higher debt loads. And so a lot of times we see people just kind of turning the corner and just saying, I'm going to save as much as I can, and typically be a little bit more aggressive with that and just see what comes out on the other side, right? When I hit my 50s. And oftentimes that will work, if you can start saving at that age.
All right, Rex, you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I think in your 40s on the debt load, and just talking about that versus the risk for just one more second, but I think because we do have the probability that in your 40s that's when you're in your highest debt typically, it's easy to blow up your financial plan and put yourself really behind the 8 ball during your 40s. And so if you take that 25% ratio, which obviously our goal is to not have debt as financial advisors, right? And we are big fans of being debt free, and yet we understand, the use of debt for leverage and to grow your assets. But
side by sides, RVs,
those typically are not great debt, right?
Oh.
They're all going down in value except for this last year because used cars are out of sight.
That's a random
year. This is one of those anomalies, But I think if you think about 25% for just a second, just run backwards through some numbers. If you had $10,000 a month, so $120,000 of income per year, right? In a lot of Midwestern states, that's not a terrible income if you're making $120,000 a year, and yet $10,000 a month if you have $2,500 a month in debt payments. So that would be your house, your escrow on your house, that would be a vehicle, things like that. I would put it out there that probably a lot of people in their 40s are, significantly above that 25% number. And they're sitting closer to 30, 35, 40, somewhere in that ballpark because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, sorry to all the Joneses, to the Smiths, since I've got a Smith on here. And so I think that this is the decade where that's critical to not try and keep up with your neighbor and to really focus on your financial health during the decade of your 40s. It is extremely critical to your future goals and your future self, if you will.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Right.
Okay. Investment strategy, aggressive. Can you just real
it's a good time to be aggressive. You still have, in your 40s, you have somewhere between, 20 to 30 years left until retirement. You're talking about, significant, 3, 4, 5 market cycles between now and retirement, where you can ride through those market cycles. Not to say they're not going to be scary or test your fortitude, but in general, this is a good time to be aggressive because you have plenty of time left. That being said, I would completely agree with Brandon that behavioral finance and knowing yourself well enough to know how much risk is too much risk is critically important. You don't want to, put yourself into such an aggressive investment to where if it goes to zero, or to where you panic out and sell and lose a bunch of money, and then you're starting over again in your 50s, because that's where you have to get into a situation where you're saving, 15, 20, 25% of your income just to get back on track on your financial planning. And so I think making sure that you're as aggressive as you can be comfortable with and as aggressive as you need to be in order to reach your goals. So,
okay. All right. The fun part, insurance. I freaking hate insurance and love insurance at the same time. It's one of those things that it has, it saved me with my house when a house fell on my house. That's a movie. When a tree fell on my house.
Tornado. We had a tornado.
Tree fell on my house and insurance was there, and it was like, okay, this is great. What other kinds of insurance do we need besides our homeowners, our life insurance? How much should we be insured, and how long should it last? Because we're going to retire in 20, 30 years. Rex?
So I'll start on this, and then I'll pass the ball over to Brandon. But I think there's a number of kinds of insurance that you ought to be having. Certainly in your 40s, you ought to have health insurance, right? Normally you do that through your employer or through the Affordable Care Act or the one of the plans for your state, wherever you're at. You ought to have term insurance. Is what we're bigger fans of, as opposed to permanent insurance, to make sure that you've got the right amount. There's a lot of rules of thumbs out there, whether it's 10 times your income, whether it's however many times of your debt, to make sure that your debt gets paid off, and then to sustain family for a certain number of years. And so there's a lot of calculations that can go through on life insurance. Auto insurance, you're going to, typically we want you to shop your auto insurance and your home insurance every 3 to 5 years, looking for different rates. I don't know if you've had insurance with any particular company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I'd love to hear from the group, if anybody's ever had their insurance rates lowered on their automobiles, even though the automobiles get older. So
that's a negative.
Yeah. so that is a big negative. So that's why we shop those insurances regularly, is to try and make sure that we're keeping good rates there. Disability insurance, specifically if you're self-employed or run your own business, a lot of times that's an insurance that gets overlooked, and yet there's a significant number. More people go through a disability as opposed to death. And so, disability insurance, I would argue, is probably even more important than life insurance, or certainly as important as life insurance is concerned. And then typically we also want an umbrella policy in place as far as insurance goes for those, unexpected, accidents that go above our limits, or slip and fall accidents, or somebody sues you or something along those lines. Those are typically very inexpensive types of insurance to add to your policies. So, if somebody's listening to this, they might think, oh my gosh, these guys are insurance hounds and love insurance. We actually don't. We actually are not enormous fans of insurance.
Wait, do you sell insurance, Rex?
But we do.
You
we are insurance licensed. We do sell insurance, and insurance does have a place. It has a place in every financial plan. It has a place in everybody's life, one way or another. But we just don't want you to be overinsured. And it's really easy, specifically in your 40s, to become overinsured between your benefit plans at work, between friends and family trying to sell you insurance, or your neighbor, whoever that is.
Never happens.
It's really easy to become overinsured, and lots of times insurance is really easy to sell because they can play on fears and emotions and things like that to try and get you to buy more, and you don't really realize it until 2 or 3 or 4 years later, and you've paid all these premiums, and then all of a sudden you realize, my gosh, there might have been a more efficient way to do this. So but Brandon he started in the insurance industry back in the day, and so he may have some additional thoughts.
Yeah. I think one stat that has always fascinated me is that, and it really holds true pretty much across the board. But for every dollar you pay in premium, the way the insurance company set it up is so that you're going to get back approximately 60 cents, which sounds like a bad deal. And it is, but essentially, there's commissions to be paid, there's buildings to be maintained, there's profits to be made, right? Like you have all those things, and so for every policy that you pay $1 into, you should get about 60 cents back. Now, some of those we're hoping for a worse return, like life insurance, right? We're hoping that we pay into it and don't ever get any money back. But to Rex's point, insurance is important. If I were to die, what would happen to my family? If I were to become disabled, what would happen to my life, right? What would happen if I had cancer? I'm not just going to not get treated, right? Like, and so you really do. There's catastrophic things that you absolutely need insurance coverage for. When I look at my insurance, right, and I look at my life insurance, my disability insurance, my health insurance, and I put all those insurances, my auto, and all that stuff all together, and look at it as a percentage of income, it's a really fairly small number.
I was going to ask what that should be, or somewhere around, if you have an idea.
I don't have the exact figure of what percentage of income that should be, but when you consider that it's more or less bulletproofing, you're trying to make your financial plan so that one thing can't just derail the whole thing. It's a relatively small number when you look at it. The other thing, and this is probably cheesy, but I look at the premiums I pay on my life insurance, my disability insurance, and I realize that 60% of everything I'm paying is actually going out to families in need, right? That have lost a spouse, that have become disabled. And 60% of everything I'm paying is actually going to those families to help take care of them. And although that's cheesy, it kind of feels good, that I'm supporting those people. And if anything ever happened to me, I'd be taken care of as well. And so I think it's important to review your insurance, make sure that you're covered so that you and your family aren't going to suffer dramatically if something happens to you. But also make sure you're not, paying for insurance that you don't need, just because it's an inefficient use of assets.
So I feel good all of a sudden, Brandon, just because I feel like my insurance can be my charitable giving plan as well.
Can you write that off, Rex?
No.
No. Well, I dabbled briefly in insurance, and back in the day, I got my license and everything. And maybe it was, the company I was with, but I've never heard of anyone until today, right now, press the importance of disability insurance. Why haven't I heard that until today?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people don't like to buy it because a lot of people have it through their employers, right? And so a lot of times people aren't pushing it or selling it because of that. And I think most people just inherently don't want to buy disability because they feel like, oh, it's always going to happen to somebody else, it'll never happen to me. And so I think most people kind of view it that way. But I think, and I wish I had the number off the top of my head, but I can't remember what the number is, but there's a certain ratio or number of people that are going to be disabled versus the people that are going to utilize life insurance, and it's somewhere around
it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 3, I think, depending on who you talk to. But
oh wow,
but yeah, it's a fairly likely scenario. Because disability, often we think of disability as getting in a nasty car accident and being, paraplegic or quadriplegic. No, like disability is skin cancer. and now you have to take 3 years off of work to go through chemotherapy. Disability is I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can become disabled and not be able to go to work. And that's what we're looking to cover. And not all disability policies are the same. It really comes down to the details of the policy. What does it cover? What, how long am I covered in my current job, or am I covered, in any job? If I can't do my current job, are they going to make me go work somewhere else? And so anyway, those are kind of the nuances that you want to make sure you look at when you're considering disability insurance.
All right, let's move along here. Brandon, do you have some more numbers for financial money management in your 40s? All right, let's hear it.
So, so this is kind of interesting. So in housing, and this is by Freddie Mac, the average interest rate nationwide on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage was 3.11% at the end of 2021. That was the average, 3.11, which is unbelievably low.
I remember refinancing people to 6.25 or it was around between 2005 and 2008 when everything went to crap, and they were ecstatic to get in the 6s, and then 5s was like unheard of, and it was a heyday, and then 2008 happened. But yeah, moving on.
So the all-time low national average, so this is national average, all-time low record was set on January 7th, 2021 at 2.65% for that 30-year. Yeah.
Whoa, they are the winners. Yeah, they are the winners. I think I'm at 3.25. So, and I'm happy with that. Like that.
Yeah.
I got that a few years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got that, but that's pretty interesting too. What was it?
2.65.
2.65 on January 2nd, 2021.
January 7th,
2021. Man, if we could know those dates in advance, that would be nice, Brandon. If you could, figure that out for next time. Okay, well, all right. We're in our 40s. We're talking about how to manage our money in our 40s, and weird, a lot of us have kids. Rex, you gave me a pretty good idea on how to handle some like money giving to the kids and how to split that up and stuff. What are we doing with the kids? How do we teach them about money? Do we just give them books? Do we give them allowances? Do we subsidize their life, and for how long? Until they're probably 30 years old. When do we kick them out? Rex, you've got more kids than all of us here combined. What are your thoughts?
way to set the stage.
I'm just trying to make sure you're credible is all.
Yeah. I'm extremely credible when it comes to kids. So for those that know me, I have a lot of kids. For those that don't, I have 7 children. So
seven. Yep.
Yeah. So,
and then he says like the oldest one and the youngest one. And I'm like, what? That is impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. There's quite the gap in ages for those 7 kids.
And did you, before you get into like the basic overview of how to teach the kids, I'm just curious, you personally, have you changed the way you've taught your kids about money from the oldest to the youngest?
Yeah, a little bit. You learn on the, you test everything out on the oldest, and then you're burned out by the youngest.
Yeah.
And so,
the youngest gets nothing.
So this is the one time that the middle kids probably benefit.
Oh my gosh.
So no, you absolutely learn. I think the important thing about kids and money is to not ignore it, not hide from it. I think you'd be amazed at how many families don't talk about money with their kids. They don't talk about how much they're making and how much they're paying on different things, and they try and protect their kids by not talking about it. And I think that in my view is a real disservice. I think it's better to be very open, very communicative with your children. When you're dealing with money, even if you want them to sit at the table while you're paying your bills, so that they understand, even though you might be making a good income, how much of that's going for the vehicles, or how much is going for the house and the light bill, and how they can help you save by turning off their lights and things of that nature. I think those are important things for kids to learn and understand. And I think working with your kids, we've talked with a lot of clients about different ways to help our kids by starting accounts with them, reviewing those accounts with them, having them maybe go through investments, and sometimes we invest money not necessarily just for a rate of return, but sometimes it's for education. And so if your kids are huge fans of certain entertainment companies or certain apparel, things like that, then sometimes you can go in and say, well, look, let's buy a piece of that company, and then let's see how they do, since you like them, and start to teach them about investments in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was surprised. So, and I mean, we went over this, but I gave my kids $100 for Christmas. And then you suggested take them to the bank, give them the cash, take them to the bank. So they had to hand that $100 bill over to the teller. Well, I have an 11 and a 7-year-old. My 11-year-old was excited because she knew she was getting the $50 back, and she already knew what Starbucks drink she was going to buy. Yeah, the 11-year-old. The 7-year-old was very skeptical and was like, Dad, no, we're not giving this lady, I don't even know her, my money. Like, what is going on here? Right. Like, it was a very interesting experience. And I'm so glad we did it that way. And it was fun. And then when Emerson got the $50 in the way we did it, we actually, I think he wanted some race car tracks or something that we got on Amazon, and then we just confiscated his $50 because what everything he wanted on Amazon came up to about that much. So he's going to learn about how to buy online here real quick. Yeah. But he had delayed gratification as well, because where my daughter went out and spent the $50 with the cash, like she handed the cash over and bought something we left the bank and went to Starbucks, and I think she spent all $50 at Starbucks, and one drink, which is one drink,
half a drink, or
one drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we went home, and then we ordered the car parts, and then he's like, Dad, where's my car part? Where's my stuff? I'm like, wow, this is how the world works. I'm like, this is how it works. And I thought it was very interesting. What so that's good. How long do you do that? How long do you give them allowance, and what do you base it off of? And then at what point, when they're 37 years old and still wanting your allowance, do you kick them off? And how do you transition out of that into the money they're making from their own job?
Yeah, I think everybody's very different. Every family is very different. And so my advice typically is going to be tailored to that family, and knowing their personalities and knowing their kids as far as how to wean off and how to do that. I know for a lot of families, we try and have them, wean off when they're 16, because lots of times by the time they're 16, they ought to be, working a part-time job, either on a weekend or nights or something like that, a little bit. Sometimes we don't, if they're heavy into athletics and their schooling is more of a priority, and they don't have time to work, then sometimes we'll continue that on throughout high school. It just kind of depends on those situations that's going on. When they're younger, lots of times we might do a little bit of an allowance, but generally we do chores, right? We pay for things. We pay for, things around the house, whether it's raking leaves, whether it's doing dishes, whether it's, helping with laundry, something like that, and have them earn it as opposed to just receive it. And so I think just when you're giving kids money and just handing it to them, unless there's something behind it, I think that can turn into a disservice, because it turns into kind of a socialistic environment a little bit, to where they then feel entitled.
This is the first time I tried that, and I felt control. I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a different feeling.
Money again, kid. It's time to start cleaning some bedrooms around here. What kind of? I think Dave Ramsey had a game board or something. Are there games, books? Are there things that you recommend that parents can use with their kids to help teach them about money and how money works?
Yeah, so I'll talk about a couple books. Brandon probably has a couple of books too. There's the ones that come to mind, and a lot of it depends on the age of the kids, right? And so my kids that are kind of reaching 10 years old and maybe early teens, there's a book out there called The Wealthy Barber. that I like an awful lot. It's kind of written for younger kids. There's also the Tuttle Twins books that talk a lot about the economy and money and different things along those lines, and how a dollar works and inflation. And those are actually great books for kids that are probably maybe about 7 to 12 or 13. And yet they do such a good job in some of those books that I'll actually not plagiarize, but I certainly will use their examples of how to explain money.
Did you say Tuttle, like Tuttle? Tuttle?
Yeah. Yep. The Tuttle Twins.
Rex, don't be ashamed of that. There was a Jeopardy champion who, when asked, because he had a long run, when asked how does he know so much, it was because he would go to the library and read the children's book sections.
Yeah, some of those books are brilliant in the way that they describe things and explain things. And so, there's something to be said for somebody that can explain something to somebody like they're 2. Right. If you can break it down that simple, it's brilliant. And so that's one of the books. I think, there's a game out there that I used to play with scout groups all the time called the stock market game. I'm not sure if it's still out there or not.
I could just imagine you like, give me all your money. It's a good game. It's a good game.
And now it's gone.
And now it's gone. See how that works? Life lesson, kids.
So it was a great game, right? You'd go through and they would draw a card, and the card would say whether the markets were up or down, or what some news item or something like that. And so they would buy or sell and make or lose money or whatever. And so we would do that for an hour, and then whoever won would get a pick, whether we get ice cream or donuts. But,
I just thought of a game I played as a kid, and I love this game, and I didn't realize I was playing the market, and that's Pit. Have you ever played Pit?
Yeah, Pit. Yeah, so that was the futures game. Yeah. Talking about futures with barley and wheat and rye and
corn and the bull and the bear. Yeah, that's a blast too.
Yeah, that is a blast from the past. So yeah. Brandon, do you have some favorite books too, I assume?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is Richest Man in Babylon. Fairly quick read. It's a short book. I think it's like 100 pages or something like that. But a little bit of the older English, older style writing, but just brilliantly put together. And in my opinion, goes A to Z on financial concepts. I thought very entertaining. And so I also wanted to bring up Rex is keeping the best secrets and not sharing them, but Rex actually plays Deal or No Deal with his kids to teach them. And I'm not sure what that teaches. It seems more like the gambling side, but there's got to be something behind it. So,
well, I'm not sure what the financial lesson is there, but they had to work as a team. And so for Christmas, we kept some of their Christmas money aside and played a couple of money games. And it was kind of fun to see how they would react and how excited they would get if there was a $2 bill inside of one of those envelopes or something like that. And so, just making games of it. But at the end of the game, I was impressed that my kids, that as far as what they won, at every one of them ended up putting over half of whatever they won into either their bank account or their investment account without prompting. And so that was phenomenal. And so that was a Prad Dad moment.
That's Prad Dad
as far as that goes. Yeah. So that was good. I think a couple other books that I really like out there. Grow Rich Slowly is a good book out there. A little bit of a long read, but great book. Goes again through money and investing for the long haul, things like that. The Millionaire Next Door or The Millionaire Mindset is another set of great books that are out there. If on the investment front, there's one out there by Richard Bernstein that was written about 22 years ago called Avoid the Noise, which I think is as applicable today as it was then. Just talking about, not making investment decisions and financial decisions based off of the latest headline. And again, investing for the long haul.
I'm not so sure Jim Cramer would like that.
Jim, yeah. If you remember what happened to Jim Cramer during 2000,
I don't know.
He should have
Spanked
read
or
it in
what?
1998.
Oh my
And
god.
so,
I have his book actually. I got about halfway through it and was like, I don't know what he's doing.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, he had, if I remember right, he had a breakdown. He was big on the tech bubble before 2000, and I think was involved in a company that may have gone belly up
Mm.
as far as that's concerned, and may have had a little bit of a breakdown back in there somewhere. But smart guy, very very smart guy. Just I think everybody makes poor decisions when they're emotionally charged.
Yeah.
So
He seems like he's 100% emotionally charged all the time. But that's another story. Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool.
So
Well, I know, and I will not get this quote right, but Shaquille O'Neal said something like this. He said, when he was talking to his kids about being rich, he said, "Oh, we're not rich. I'm rich." And, you're going to have to earn it essentially. Like, I'm not giving you my money, and I thought, you know what, that's pretty great because he's teaching them at a young age, like, hey man, to each your own, like you got to figure it out. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I tell my kids all the time that my goal is to not leave them an inheritance, right? And so my goal is to spend that and enjoy
All getting
life
spent. Well,
and
I
make some
think
memories.
our Berkshire Hathaway friend, I mean, he's got a plan to where his money's gone within the first or second generation, right? He said, I feel like it'd be an undue burden for my like great grandkids to try and figure out how to spend my money. It's just not fair to them, and so he's got it figured out how it's going to disperse out and going to be gone, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's done a lot of estate planning on that end as far as
You should
our
talk
friends in
about
Omaha.
estate planning, Rex. Look at that.
Look at that.
Job.
Look at that. Estate planning in your 40s,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Sure. Do we need it in our 40s?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You need some things by the time you're in your 40s. Most people in their 40s, they have kids, and so what happens if something happens to you? Do you have a guardianship directive inside of your will? Do you have who's gonna look over the financial assets and make financial decisions for your minor children? So you certainly ought to have some basic estate planning documents in place, whether it be a will, whether it be your healthcare directives, your medical powers of attorney, either immediate or springing powers of attorney that you ought to have in place. I personally am big fans of people having family trusts, revocable living trusts in your 40s. It makes life so much simpler on your kids and those that survive if something happens to you.
Is that a plan with
Um,
Baxter thing, or do they need to call their attorney, or how does that work?
So we aren't attorneys, right? There's our disclaimer. We're not attorneys. We do consult with attorneys and work closely with attorneys in drafting or guiding some of the provisions that may be important to our clients in those documents. So lots of times we'll sit down with our clients and with the attorney and go through different kinds of documents that we think that they need, and the attorney certainly will guide that and draft it and do the actual work. And so I think our next podcast in February, we probably will have a guest attorney on our podcast, and that will probably be focused on estate planning in general. And so I'm sure we'll get into that. But I think it's extremely important to have that in your 40s, and yet you'd be amazed at how many people in their 40s have nothing, just haven't done any estate planning at all in their 40s, as the vast majority of the public.
Yep.
And yeah, so yeah, and you're not alone,
Yeah.
right? And so I think a lot of people think it's too expensive. Lots of times for basic estate packages in the Midwest are going to range somewhere between maybe $1,500 to maybe $3,000 for basic packages. If we're dealing with special needs or asset protection trust or generation skipping trust, different techniques and technical issues out there, then that obviously would go up from there. But
All right, Brandon, any word on that?
Just that you're right. Most people don't have that in place, which works out just fine as long as you don't die. And that's
Yeah.
obviously there are benefits even while you're alive to have that stuff in place. But that's really the biggest, and even in your 20s and 30s, right? I remember kind of looking through that on my own, and I said, man, if I were to die, right? Because I've got life insurance on myself and on my wife, and and we, started building our net worth, and I started looking at that and saw the dollar amount that would be given to my kids when they were 18. They lose both, if they lost both parents, and they're handed this massive, sum of money. I can't think of a way to destroy a kid any faster. Right. And really the best way to control that is to set up a trust, make it so the assets of, the life insurance proceeds, assets that you've accumulated are in the trust. And then, you assign people to take care of your kids. I've on mine, and that's what's cool about trust. You can do whatever you want. But on mine, I've set aside, I will pay for, weddings and education and things like that up to this period of time. Rex kind of came up with it. I fully espoused it, but people are who they are financially once they're 30, right? Before that, a lot of stuff fluctuates. And so I kind of built my trust around that, right? So that I don't give my kids a lot of money before they're 30. I pay for some.
What do you mean by that, Brent? People are who they're financial.
Meaning that by the time you're 30, your financial patterns, your financial habits are kind of stuck into place, and sometimes I feel like it helps not to be given too much money prior to that, and you can do it, and you can do it wisely and things like that. But for me personally, I just wanted my kids to have some things paid for, but for the most part, have them learn how to exist in this world without, handouts given to them.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, right, giving them a little bit to experiment with, to try with, and then a little bit more and a little bit more, because ultimately I want financial happiness and financial freedom for my kids, and I want that as soon as they can handle it. But I want them to be able to learn first. I think Rex frequently quotes that the typical average inheritance is spent in, I think it's 2 or 3 years. And
18 months.
18 months.
I could do it.
And I can attest to that. You watch people given money and it is gone, like just overnight. And I mean, this money's lasted for decades for these people. It's divvied out to their beneficiaries and it's just gone. And some of it's spent wisely and a lot of it's not. And so I don't know. That's where trust comes in. You're able to really guide what you would want to have happen for your kids. And in your 40s, that's probably one of the more applicable things.
All right, so we're in our 40s. We're wrapping up here, talking about money management in your 40s. And we talked a little bit about this next question in our previous episode. You can go back and listen to that one. That one was episode 13, Financial Planning Basics, about what should the balance be between spending, investing, savings. When you're in your 40s, and of course, everything depends on this show. What are we looking for as a balance for savings? That 10 to 15% range?
Yeah. Yeah. Rex, I'll turn that over to Rex.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
I'll let him say it depends. I'm pretty sure I said that in the last episode 5 times. So
it depends. I can say that. We really try to hit that 10 to 15% in our early 40s. And so typically, people can start out at that. If you get people to start at 10 to 15% when they're in their early 20s, when they're just getting out of college or starting those first jobs, then typically they'll maintain that throughout their lifetime. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't. And so a lot of people, when they're getting out of college, they're not saving that 10 to 15%, and then they get married and then they have a child or two. And so lots of people in their late 20s, early 30s are starting out just at the matched level. So on a 401k plan. And so if the 401k plan it has a match of 4% if you do 5 or if you do 6, then they're starting at that 5 or 6% level. And then it's just kind of a set and forget, and they just forget about it and they just leave it. And next thing they know, they're in their 40s or 50s and it's still at that, 5 or 6% level. And so we really try to work with people building up to their 40s to increase that contribution by 1% per year or half of every raise or different techniques to try and get them up to that 10 to 15%, certainly at least by the time they're in their 40s if they didn't get there at an earlier habit or an earlier age. And this is where the financial planning comes into place is when you're in your 40s, we still have a lot of time. And so you're not necessarily under the gun to where we have to jump up savings drastically if you haven't done a ton beforehand. When we get into our late 40s and then into our early 50s, if we haven't gotten to that savings rate, then we start feeling a lot of pressure to try and get there or to delay retirement, one or the other. And so I think money. That, or making more money is not the answer. I can show you plenty of examples that people will spend what they make. And so, just because you're making more money doesn't mean that you're saving. It just means you're increasing your lifestyle a lot of times, which just compounds the issue. So, but
yeah, screw it. Never make more money. Bad idea.
yeah. Take it back, would you? Don't make more money. Make more money, but make sure your savings increases, relationally with it. So.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Okay. So this is Through the Pines Financial Planning Podcast, and we're wrapping things up here. Is there a question that you guys get from 40-year-olds more than any other question?
I get a couple, two that come to mind that I get a lot, and Brandon, you probably have a couple as well, but probably the one question I get a lot is Rex, I've changed jobs 2 or 3 times over the years. I've got some old retirement accounts. What do I do with them? And so lots of times by the time we're in our 40s, we're in a more stable either career or a business that we've started, and it's starting to take off and do better, and we're a little more stable in that business. And so we're not changing jobs as frequently, hopefully, by the time we're in our 40s. And so we try and get things consolidated. We try and get things put together, whether we're rolling that money into IRAs, whether we're putting it into the new 401k or setting up a 401k for you as a business owner. That's probably one of the bigger questions we get. And then the other one revolves around insurance. Is lots of times in their 20s and 30s, they're getting sold permanent insurance as a hybrid plan, as kind of retirement and life insurance combo. And they're just not seeing that grow the way that they would like it to lots of times. And so lots of times they'll ask us a lot of questions regarding permanent insurance versus term insurance, when one is good versus the other is good, and different ways to make sure that they remain protected, but they still have liquid assets when they need it in retirement. So those are probably the top two I see. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is a lot of times in your 40s, that's when it first really hits people, right? In your 30s, people start saving into a 401k here and there, but they feel like they're just like being overachievers, right? I'm in that bucket, right? Like, yeah,
I'm saving. Yeah.
Right. But in the 40s is when it gets real, and rightfully so. It's when you're starting, you can make or break a retirement with your 40s. And I think it goes back to what Rex was saying earlier is 40s is what typically when people come out of just like being so tight, based on, spending money on kids and everything else, their careers start rolling and they finally get that extra money, and you start to see people in their 40s making decisions. And that's either, side by sides and boats and, or is it a bigger house? Like you'll see people go out and buy a house that's way more than they should, right? Or whatever that is. And they can, with that extra little bit of freedom, do you take that and secure retirement, or do you take that and jump that lifestyle? And it might not be an either or, it might be a balance of both. But 40s is a lot of times where people really have that ability to do more than just start saving into a 401k, right? But actually kind of take charge of their overall financial life. And so hopefully, that a lot of retirements I think are made or broke in their 40s.
Okay, here's a super awesome hypothetical that you are going to tell me maybe on, or it's possible. I already know the answer. It's possible. If you're in your 40s, say mid 40s, and you want to retire a multimillionaire, is it still possible? And how much would you have to make?
It's
maybe.
Possible.
Maybe.
Well, multimillionaire. So what do you want? How much do you want in savings?
$2
million. So $2 million in investable assets is a big number if you're starting at zero mid 40s, That is a pretty big number. But let's just say that, right? Let's say $2 million. Say you got $0. What are we assuming? An 8% rate of return?
Oh no, we're at 12.
We're 12.
Yeah.
We're at an easy 12.
Let's use 8.
Let's use 8.
Brandon.
Oh.
Sorry, we are conservative advisors, and I'm not even sure 8 is conservative as far as that goes for the next decade.
Oh,
so
conservatives probably. Oh wow, really, Rex? Are you making a prediction right now for the next decade?
No, I'm not making. That's exactly what I am not doing.
Okay, exactly.
I'm not making any predictions.
So 8%, assuming you're 45 going to 65,
Okay.
and you want $2 million, we're looking at $3,395 per month.
It's possible.
It's possible.
It's possible.
It depends.
Yeah.
But man, that number becomes a lot easier when there's 40 years.
Or even if you're 30 years old doing that.
If you got 40 years until retirement, right? So you're 25, that same number is $573.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's pretty.
And you
it's
ran that
dramatic,
at
the
8%?
difference. Yeah. And that's what gets hard though, right? If you don't do anything in your 40s and you wait till you're in your mid 50s, then it's like, you're just hammering it in and you're not really getting very much compounding interest. It's more or less just how much can I just, shove in. I know we're short on time. I wanted to give you one last quick story. I had a client who was just a teenager, right? But he had parents that were probably in their 40s. Living at home, right? And I think he told me, I was just playing video games, not really doing a whole lot, right? But he was living in his parents' basement, and that was the one condition on him living in the basement was that he saved into his 401k, and it was something like $500 a month. They said, you know what, you do what you want, but you've got a 401k at work, and you're going to save, you're going to save this much per month. And he started doing that not because he knew anything or wanted, it was just because those were the conditions. Seemed like better than paying rent. Yeah. And you would not, it amassed to an incredible number for him and really just built out. And so I wonder sometimes how often, that's possible, where you got the kids living in the basement, you're not ready to really kick them out, but you know what, they got money floating around and you tell them, hey, $500 a month into your 401k plan, do it into the Roth side, right? If they're not making a lot, so it all grows tax-free, it's tax-free in retirement. That can do some pretty incredible things for your kids just by telling them to do it.
Very cool. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. For more questions or to get in touch with Rex or Brandon or Dan, who was unable to join us today, it's planwithbaxter.com, planwithbaxter.com, and it's BAXTER, planwithbaxter.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that we are very beautiful, handsome young men. If you are not, he has kids. If you're not listening to this on the podcast, you can watch the visual version over at the Banyan Collective on YouTube. That's Banyan, BANYAN, the Banyan Collective on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button and the little bell alert as not to miss another upcoming podcast or live version. Catch the live versions once a month. You can actually chime in. And so if we're talking about a subject that might, you have a question about or sort of pertains to you, you can chime in with a question. We can answer those in real time, which is pretty cool. As much as we can anyway, in a live format on live TV. Is that what we say? So but it's fun. And we like to do that. So watch for that next live in February. Otherwise, thanks you guys. Appreciate it. And this has been Through the Pines, reminding you to use yesterday's dollars to finance tomorrow's dreams.